This is the story of Charles Okonkwo, a man of 45 years. He lived alone in apartment 7B at Riverside Heights Estate in Akuji. On this particular evening, he sat at his dining table. The apartment was silent. He ate his meal slowly, iba and egusi soup. Every movement was deliberate, careful. The only sound was the ticking of his wall clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. He finished eating, washed his plate, dried it, put it away. Everything had its place in Charles's world. Everything except people. Night came. Charles lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His phone rested on the nightstand. The screen lit up suddenly. A call. He looked at the name. His brother, Tony. He watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, then silence. He picked up the phone, scrolled through his contacts. 53 names. When was the last time he called any of them? When was the last time they called him? He set the phone down, turned off the light. Tomorrow would be another day. Alone. Morning arrived at Riverside Heights Estate. Mrs. Grace owned the small shop on the ground floor. She was a cheerful woman, always smiling, always greeting everyone. She saw Charles walking toward the gate. He wore his usual neat shirt, his usual serious expression. "Mr. Charles, good morning," she called out. He nodded, barely. He did not stop walking. Mrs. Grace watched him go. Her daughter Angela stood beside her. "That man never smiles, Mama," Angela said. "Some people carry heavy burdens, my daughter. We cannot see what weighs on their hearts," Mrs. Grace replied. But Mrs. Grace did not follow up. She went back to arranging her goods. Life moved on. Charles worked from home. He was an accountant. Good with numbers, not good with people. His laptop screen glowed in the dim apartment. Spreadsheets, calculations, reports. His phone rang again. The office. Mr. Benjamin calling. Charles stared at the screen. He let it ring. The ringing stopped, then it started again. Same number. He pressed the silent button. The phone buzzed uselessly on the table. He returned to his work. Numbers did not judge. Numbers did not ask questions. Numbers did not leave. In apartment 6B, the Williams family sat down for dinner. Emmanuel, his wife Betty, their 2 teenage sons. They talked about their day, normal family things. "Emmanuel, have you seen our neighbor recently? That Charles?" Betty asked. "Which one?" Emmanuel replied. "Apartment 7B, right next door. I have not seen him in several days," she said. "The man is always inside. Maybe he traveled somewhere," Emmanuel answered. "Without telling anyone?" Betty questioned. "Betty, please, is he your brother? Let the man have his privacy," Emmanuel said dismissively. Betty said nothing more, but something bothered her. A small voice in her head. She ignored it. They all ignored it. That night, Charles stood in his bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. A tired face looked back. Gray hair at the temples, lines around the eyes. When did he become so old? He opened the medicine cabinet. Blood pressure pills, heart medication. He took one pill, then another. He closed the cabinet, walked to the living room, sat on the sofa. He reached for the TV remote, then pain, sharp, sudden, like a knife in his chest. He gasped, tried to stand. His legs would not obey. He fell back onto the sofa. His phone. Where was his phone? There, on the dining table, 3 meters away. He reached out. His vision blurred. His hand dropped. The wall clock kept ticking. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Then Charles Okonkwo died, alone, in the silence. 1 week passed. Life at Riverside Heights Estate continued as always. Children played football in the compound. Women hung their laundry. The water vendor called out his sales. Mrs. Grace served customers in her shop. Everyone went about their business. No one noticed the man in apartment 7B. No one knocked on his door. No one called his phone. Well, that is not true. His phone rang 47 times that week, but Charles could not answer. He would never answer again. 10 days after Charles died,
Betty was cooking in her kitchen. She stopped, sniffed the air. Something smelled wrong. "Emmanuel, come here," she called out. Her husband came into the kitchen, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it?" he asked. "Do you smell that?" Betty said. "Smell what?" he replied. "That smell. Something is rotting somewhere," she explained. "Probably a dead rat in the ceiling. It will pass," Emmanuel said casually. "This is not a rat smell. This is coming from outside. From next door, I think," Betty insisted. "Betty, that man probably forgot to take out his garbage before traveling. It is nothing," Emmanuel dismissed. But it was not nothing. It was everything. And still, no one checked. Another week passed. 2 weeks since Charles died. The smell grew stronger, impossible to ignore. Other neighbors noticed it too. They covered their noses when they walked past apartment 7B. They complained to each other, but no one knocked on the door. No one called the police. They assumed, they guessed, they waited for someone else to do something. And Charles remained on his sofa, alone, forgotten. Finally, on the 21st day, the neighbors gathered in the hallway. Mrs. Grace was there, Betty and Emmanuel, the estate chairman, Mr. Michael, several others, all covering their noses. "We cannot continue like this. The smell is unbearable," Mr. Michael declared. "Chairman, what if something is wrong? I have not seen Mr. Charles in almost 3 weeks," Mrs. Grace said worriedly. "I told my husband something was not right. I told him," Betty added. "How was I supposed to know?" Emmanuel defended himself. "We need to break down the door, now," Mr. Michael commanded. They all knew, deep down, they all knew what they would find. But knowing and seeing are different things. The door burst open. They entered apartment 7B. The smell hit them like a physical force. Mrs. Grace looked toward the sofa. She screamed, a sound of pure horror. There was Charles, still sitting where he died 3 weeks ago. His body had decomposed. The wall clock on the wall had stopped. His phone sat on the table. 47 missed calls showing on the screen. "Oh God, Jesus Christ, oh God," Mrs. Grace cried out. 3 weeks, we were all here, all of us, and he was right there dead for 3 weeks, Betty said in shock. "I will call the police. Everyone please step outside," Mr. Michael instructed. But they could not move. They stood frozen, staring at what their indifference had created. A man who died alone, unnoticed, unmissed. Police cars arrived, an ambulance. Officers entered the apartment. They brought out a body bag, black, heavy, final. The neighbors gathered in the compound, watching, whispering. Everyone wanted to know what happened. Now they cared. Now they were curious. Too late. Always too late. "Mama, is it true? Mr. Charles is really dead?" Angela asked. "Yes, my daughter. He has been dead for 3 weeks and nobody knew. Nobody checked on him," Mrs. Grace answered. "But how is that possible?" Angela questioned. Mrs. Grace had no answer. "How do you explain such a thing? How do you explain a world where a man dies and nobody notices?" That evening, Mrs. Grace sat alone in her shop. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Angela came and hugged her mother. "Mama, why are you crying? You barely knew him," Angela said softly. "That is exactly why I am crying, Angela. That is exactly why. How can someone live among us and we know nothing about them? What was his favorite food? Did he have family? Was he sick? Was he lonely? We never asked. We never cared. And now he is gone, dead on his sofa for 3 weeks while we all walked past his door. What kind of people are we?" Mrs. Grace sobbed. Angela had no answer. She was 16, but even she understood. They had all failed. Every single one of them. That night, Emmanuel could not sleep. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall he shared with apartment 7B. Betty entered the room. "You are not sleeping?" she asked. "I keep thinking about that day, when you told me you smelled something. I dismissed you. I told you to leave the man alone. What if we had checked? What if we had knocked on his door? Maybe he was still alive then. Maybe we could have saved him," Emmanuel confessed. "We all failed him, Emmanuel, not just you, all of us. He lived right next door, right there, and I did not know his favorite color, did not know if he had children, did not know anything.
"He was invisible to us until he died," Betty replied quietly. They sat in silence. Guilt is a heavy burden. Regret is heavier still. 3 days later, the estate held a small memorial service. In the compound, Pastor Daniel led the service. About 30 residents attended. 30 people who never spoke to Charles when he was alive. But now they came. Now they cared. Brothers and sisters, we gather to remember Charles Okonkwo, a man who lived among us, a man we have now lost. Let his death be a lesson. Let it remind us that we are our brother's keeper, that we must look after one another, that we must not wait until it is too late, Pastor Daniel preached. The words hung in the air. True words, painful words. Some people cried. Some bowed their heads in shame. They all understood. The lesson had been learnt, but the price was too high.
Apartment 7B stood empty now, cleaned. The smell was gone. A few boxes remained, Charles's belongings, waiting for his family. They finally came, his brother Tony, his sister Mary, both crying, both filled with guilt. They had not visited in 2 years, had not called in months, and now they packed his things, his neat shirts, his books, his photographs. In one photo, Charles was young, smiling, surrounded by friends. That was a different Charles, from a different time, before the loneliness consumed him. Days passed, but something had shifted at Riverside Heights Estate. Mrs. Grace was different now. She paid attention. A customer came to her shop, a man she had seen many times but never spoken to. "Good afternoon, sir. How are you today?" she asked warmly. The man looked surprised. People rarely asked, rarely cared. "I am fine, thank you," he replied. "God bless you, sir. Please take care of yourself," Mrs. Grace said with genuine concern. It was a small thing, a simple greeting, but small things matter. Small things can save lives. That same day, Betty did something she had never done before. She knocked on another neighbor's door, Mrs. Rose, an old woman who lived alone on the 3rd floor. "Yes? Who is it?" the old woman called out. "Good afternoon, ma. It is Betty from apartment 6B. I just wanted to check on you, to see if you are well, if you need anything," Betty explained. Mrs. Rose opened the door. Her eyes were wet, touched by this unexpected kindness. "Thank you, my dear. Thank you for asking. No one has asked me that in a very long time," Mrs. Rose said gratefully. They talked for a while about small things, normal things, and Mrs. Rose smiled. A real smile. She felt seen. She felt remembered. She felt alive. That evening, the Williams family sat down for dinner again, but this time was different. Emmanuel spoke with purpose. "Tomorrow, we should visit Mrs. Rose upstairs, check if she needs help with anything. Maybe buy her some groceries," he suggested. His sons nodded. They understood. Betty reached across the table, squeezed her husband's hand. No words were needed. Change had come. Born from tragedy, born from guilt, but change nonetheless. Night fell on Riverside Heights Estate. The building stood quiet. Lights glowed in the windows. The sounds of life filled the air. Talking, laughter, television shows, a baby crying. Normal sounds, beautiful sounds. The sounds of people, living, breathing, existing. But apartment 7B remained dark, empty, silent. A reminder, a warning, a lesson written in the absence of one man. Charles Okonkwo lived among them for 2 years, but it took his death for them to truly see him, to see each other. Some lessons come too late, but perhaps not too late to change, perhaps not too late to reach out, to knock on a door, to make a phone call, to ask a simple question. How are you? Are you okay? Do you need anything? 3 simple questions that could have saved a life. This is the story of Charles Okonkwo. May his silence teach us to listen. May his loneliness teach us to care. May his death teach us to live differently, better, together, before it is too late.